线长山又高，处处港口都险要。
Today, I got another interview episode with the very special Angelica Oung, who knows quite a bit about a variety of topics. So, if you like our conversation, please like this episode and leave some words of encouragement or questions you got for her in the comments so I can have her back sooner rather than later. Today, we're mostly going to be talking about her political journey and the many things that led her to where she is today. But before we begin, I'd like to give a huge shout out to my upper level patrons Alvin Zhao, Wang Yijing, Michael Kim Victor, CD14039, Jim Fox, Capacete Fogo, SCY, Maddie Roxy, Thomas Siegel, Zhang Wei Wei, Dolores Austin, and T. Thank you all very much for your generous support, and to everyone else, your support is just as vital for this show to go on, and I appreciate each and every one of you. Now, on to the show. Hello, so today I got with me Miss Angelica Oung, and we have a pretty interesting history because for the longest time, I don't know why, but we were mutually blocked on Twitter.
I don't know if you blocked me first or I blocked you first, but I certainly thought you were a weirdo and an asshole.
Well, I probably was an asshole. And my suspicion is Noah Smith might have told you to block me.
Oh, you know what? He might have. He actually told me to, beware of a whole bunch of people that later turned out to be perfectly nice.
But, I mean, in my case, I kind of am. It's the first 10 minutes of the podcast. I have to bleep that out for YouTube. The word asshole, but that's fine. Now that we're here and we're mutually unblocked after some of our mutual friends got us in contact with one another, would you like to introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. My name is Angelica Oung, and you can find me on Twitter. I am both of a manic nuclear scheme girl because I'm really pro-nuclear energy, and it is literally my job to promote nuclear energy. And I also call myself Taiwan's #1 neoliberal shill, although we can talk about whether that label still applies later.
That's fine. I think labels are not as important as essence and, your actual views and the meat and potatoes of all of your views. I mean, that's why we're going beyond labels and going deep into the facts, because I think after all of this time, we've reached similar conclusions about many things. We're not in agreement about everything, but what's interesting is we both took a very different path to get to where we are today. So growing up in Taiwan, what's your kind of family background and everything? Because it's pretty relevant to understanding your political trajectory, believe it or not.
Yeah. I was a little girl growing up in Taiwan before they changed all the textbooks, So we still had to learn about how our compatriots in China are suffering, and we have to go and bring light back to the motherland and rescue them because apparently they were all chilling by the side of the road, starving.
生活在水深火热之中.
That's right. Piles of skulls everywhere. That sort of thing. And back then, it just wasn't even a question. We were Chinese, of course. And I think everybody was aware, obviously, that Taiwan wasn't going to retake China, the mainland, in actuality. But we would say a lot of things like, well, this is where the best of traditional Chinese culture actually came to rest in Taiwan, because in China, it was all destroyed in the Cultural Revolution. And Taiwan, even though it's small, actually contains the essence of China, the authentic China.
This was in the 80s, right?
Yeah, this was in the 80s, and I would say it continues into the early 90s.
Definitely.
And then I left Taiwan for quite a while. And
let's get the years, though.
Sure.
What year were you born? When did you leave?
I was born in 1980. And I left Taiwan when I was 9 years old to go to Australia. And after sort of getting my education, basically all abroad, I came back to Taiwan around 2004. And stayed for a few years, and I was in reporting. But funnily enough, I never really got that much into politics. I was actually really into politics, but as an American. Mm-hmm. So if you ask me what party do I belong to, I would say, obviously, I'm a Democrat. I'm a NPR listening, latte sipping Democrat. And Taiwanese politics just kind of eluded me for those years. And then I left Taiwan for a really long time between 2010 to until COVID. So basically, I was away from Taiwan for like a whole decade.
So when you were like 24 to 30, you were in Taiwan?
Yeah, pretty much.
Also, and then from when you were like born until you were like 9?
Yeah, I was in Taiwan too.
So you must have been like around 7 or 8 when Jiang Jingguo died.
Yeah.
Did your class go outside and kneel on the side of the street as his
No, but I do remember that happening, like, and as being a really big deal. And I remember as a really little girl, like, just what a huge event that was. And I don't actually remember Tiananmen itself, but I remember after it happened, they came out with a song that was called 历史的伤口, the wound of history. And I remember like being obsessed with it because it was so dramatic. And I really literally thought that like thousands of students were mashed into a kind of student patty on Tiananmen Square. And that was definitely a very, very early memory. So I would say that when I left Taiwan, obviously I was just a kid, but still not very political.
So you weren't really you weren't really anti-KMT either. They were just there. And for the longest time, they were just the ruling party. And Jiang Jingguo, you were just taught was a great dude.
And then when I came back, of course, I knew everything was more complicated. But basically, like, I was here during the Mainland years.
Right.
And so while I knew that there's a lot of friction between the KMT and the DPP, I was aware of that. It's not like I was a complete vegetable. But you got to understand, back then, Taiwan felt like more of a sleepy backwater. And my politics was also really influenced sort of by my job because I was working for Apple Daily. So do you know Next Media Animation? So my boss was basically extremely anti-China. I wouldn't say they were pro-DPP. We never really talked about the DPP. It was always just how horrible China was.
So they were very anti-Ma, probably. I remember them being pretty anti-Ma in like the 2010s, like late 2000s, early 2010s.
Maybe, but I worked in the international section.
Okay.
Do you remember those like wacky Taiwanese animations?
Yes.
Yeah, so I was the first person they hired to write in English for those. And so we didn't really do anything with domestic politics because it was for an international audience. But it was always like, you can actually say my job title could be creative panda basher because that was pretty much what I did all day. And I didn't think too much about it. I really just accepted it. But I also had the worldview back then, I think is pretty common mindset that China was on the road to liberalization and that it was just going to be more and more liberal and more like the United States. I don't think people expected it to go all the way to being a liberal democracy, but that it will just get more liberal.
That's what it seemed like during the Jiang Zemin and Hu Jintao years.
Exactly. So then I went back to the States and I really did not pay attention to the politics of Asia.
So
for
Sunflower
10 years.
Movement, you were...
I was actually completely checked out. I didn't even know what the Sunflower Movement was until I came back. And so I came back during COVID after living in the States for a whole decade. And to be very frank about it, I didn't even know if I was ever going to come back to Taiwan. So it was a very, very sudden shock to find myself like working at my job one day and then the next week being back in Taiwan. My brother basically said, Angelica, you got to come back. This is going to be really bad and they're not going to handle it well in the United States. So I did. It was the best decision ever, but it was also extremely destabilizing. And while I was kind of stuck in quarantine, I just watched a lot of YouTube videos, and a lot of them were like about Taiwanese politics because I was catching up. And I saw all these videos of Ing-wen, and she would go on like Potter King or all those little DPP pan-green YouTube shows. And I was like, oh, wow, she's so different from Ma. She's so smart and so quippy and so cool. And I really fell headfirst into the plucky little democracy standing up against China thing. And for a while, I was just a huge DPP Tsai Ing-wen fangirl.
I'm assuming you saw that interview she did with CNN where she's like, in the event of war, we will survive the first wave and then we'll wait for international support.
Something like that. Yeah. And
this was before Ukraine.
This was before Ukraine. And to tell you the truth, even when I was very naively pro-DPP, I kind of saw that as a problem, right? Because I think it doesn't take a lot of investigation to realize that squaring up against China for Taiwan is just
suicide.
Extremely problematic, even assuming that America is going to back us to the hilt, which has never been promised. So I saw it as definitely a big problem hanging over Taiwan, and I was just wondering why everybody else wasn't more freaked out. I was like, I'm walking around here, everybody's just living their life, and don't they know that this is the most dangerous place in the world? And I think it took me a long time to realize that everybody had their own psychological coping mechanisms.
What were some of the coping mechanisms you feel like you encountered?
A lot of the Taiwanese population, more than you might think, have actually already put themselves into a post-unification mindset. What I mean by that is they know it's going to happen. They don't know how it's going to happen, but they assume it's just going to happen when it's time, and they're not going to worry about it. And they assume that it's not going to be bloody. So they already, having made those assumptions, they no longer worry about a violent war.
They're more concerned about like what's real, like the immediate problems, like prices and energy and stuff like that.
Yeah, they kind of get on with their lives because they assume that there's not going to be this struggle to the death, right? So, and funnily enough, a lot of those people with this mindset have family in the military or know about the military.
Yeah.
Because a lot of them have just said to me pretty straight up, like, our guys aren't going to die for the Americans.
Definitely.
Some of them even say they might turn on whoever the U.S. have in Taiwan at the time first.
Yeah.
It's
because the top brass in the military, when were they appointed?
I don't know.
Around
actually.
the time when Hao Bo-chun was the chief of general staff. Now Hao Bo-chun, he was anti-U.S., like anti-CIA. He was very anti-communist, but he was like equally, if not more so, like anti-CIA. Like with
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so like when the U.S. when Zhang Xianyi defected to the U.S. after revealing all of the nuclear secrets, the U.S. actually had to send people to go meet with Hao Bo-chun and say, "Hey, you touch him, you're screwed."
Wow.
And like one of Li Denghui's first orders of business was to remove him from power.
Yeah, so that's one of the things that I gradually learned about Taiwan is that the entire military system is still extremely pro-KMT, extremely blue. And what's really funny is I don't think they feel the same animosity for the mainland as they used to. And it's really funny because I would watch those retired generals on these talk shows where they would analyze, let's say, the recent India, Pakistan standoff, right, where the Pakistanis took down a few Mirage jets with Chinese-made J-10Cs, and they just can't hide it. They're proud. They're proud that these Chinese-made jets were able to perform very well, and you can tell that they're just all they wanted to do was for China to be great, and so even though it's not their version of China that rose up to be great, they still can't help but be proud.
Yeah, that's a very good way of putting it. I think if you only consume English language media from Taiwan, you'll find that you won't hear these sorts of voices because right now it's very controlled by the DPP. People like and their little cronies. People like Brian Hyo, and so and a large part of that is so they can tell their voters, hey, look, we're on the right path because these foreign reporters are saying positive things about us. We got America's support.
So let me go back a little bit because we were talking about the mental mechanisms for coping. Right. And so I think for a certain subset of people, that's how they cope with it. They basically don't see the possibility of serious fighting breaking out. Mm-hmm. And then you have, that's the pan-blue coping mechanism.
Right.
For the pan-greens, it's a totally different coping mechanism, and I find it much scarier, actually, which is they cope with it by thinking that the United States is somehow omnipotent, and as long as we do all the right things, they will be on our side and protect us. And China would never dare to invade us, or even if they do, they're going to be defeated because the mighty U.S. military will just overwhelm them. And we just need to play our role. And you can see it very well in the new series that's come out that's basically Cold War era propaganda.
What is Zero Day Attack?
Zero Day Attack. In that show, basically that's all about domestic Taiwanese politics, and it's just like handled in like a couple of lines of dialogue. Oh yeah, the U.S. carriers are standing by. Really? Okay.
The way they frame it is Taiwan would be able to prevent an attack by the PLA if it weren't for the many sleeper agents of the CPC in Taiwan. And by sleeper agents, they mean anyone at this point who was not on board with Ching-te. So if you're pro KMT, if you're pro TPP, look, I am who I am. I don't really hide it. But now it's like those people are grouped in with me, which is really funny.
Kind of weird, right?
Yeah.
We're all fellow travelers now.
We're all fellow travelers.
And we're all impurities. Yeah.
I want to bring up something because the DPP keeps on accusing the KMT of being the KMT's the CPC's proxy over here in Taiwan,
yes.
right? Mm-hmm. Now, recently we had the mass recalls, and they had, the pro-recall side had a bunch of rallies and a bunch of cringe events, and the anti-recall side also had their own rallies and events. And after my last music video came out, the home invasion one, 我们家被闯空门, the KMT people, through like event organizers, actually reached out to me saying, hey, we heard this song. We think it really fits our theme for our event we're going to have in Keelung. Are you free on this day to come perform? And I was like, sure. And then later that day, they were like, wait, you actually support communism, right? And I was like, yes. And then I knew where it was going, so I was like, look, if it's inconvenient for me to be at your event, I totally understand. There's no hard feelings. Because they don't want, they're already accused of being communists. Now, if they have someone like me who's like openly, friendly with communists, then that kind of gives the DPP ammo. So, of course, they...
Yeah, the KMT is actually unbelievably boxed in.
Mm-hmm. Nothing they do is right.
Nothing. They can't do anything right because The problem is actually there is no anti-American pro-Chinese party in Taiwan. We've got...
They're individuals, but not parties.
They're individuals, but not parties. Both the KMT and the DPP are pro-American parties, and they've gotten the legitimacy and the hard power behind their administrations from the U.S. Back in the day, how did Taiwan get rich off milk powder from U.S. aid and flour? You know, that's why we got a taste for bread, right? And little girls and boys even went around in flour sack dresses because we were so poor then. So that economic aid from the U.S. Really meant a lot. And then after that, of course, trade with the U.S. meant a lot. So we were economically uplifted by the U.S. and we got to keep our de facto independence thanks to the U.S. Strait crisis in the 90s, right? The PRC got a little bit excited, and what did Clinton do? 2 aircraft carriers right through the Taiwan Straits. They backed right down. So I think whether you are DPP or KMT, you are a U.S.-aligned party because for a long time in Taiwan, that was how we got to be a political entity, right, rather than part of the PRC. Now, the problem comes is we're in this tricky geopolitical time where the power of mainland China surged, and they become by far the biggest regional, I would say regional great power.
Yeah.
And while the U.S., you can still argue, is the world's only remaining superpower, they are really far away. And in many ways, their powers have been tested in the past few years, and it hasn't been as absolute as we all previously assumed.
Which is the next thing I wanted to get into, because a lot of the politics over here is kind of operates with the assumption of, you know, U.S. hegemony, U.S. support, and all of that. But as events like Ukraine happen, more and more people are questioning this so-called alliance, right? And they're looking at Zelensky and saying, "Hey, we don't want to go on this dangerous path. Look at Ukraine. What has the U.S. done for them? What kind of support have they given? What if there's war between us and the mainland? Are we going to be in a similar situation?" And these are very valid questions. But how has the ruling party responded to these questions?
Well, I think they don't really have a good response for these questions, apart from turning their attention inwards, right? It's like, I find it very, very telling that I don't know if they do that anymore, but it used to be that the most treasonous, horrible conspiracy theory you could entertain was 以美论.
Yeah.
The theory of doubting America. Mm-hmm. How dare you doubt America? Because on every objective level, if you analyze Taiwan's ability to defend ourselves versus the mainland's abilities, I mean, there's just no way you can see a scenario where Taiwan doesn't get wrecked.
There was a time when Taiwan could declare independence, and that was during Jiang Jie's era.
Yeah.
But he refused. If he refused and his son has to continue his legacy, then he's not going to do it either. And then after that, the objective conditions for that to even be a possibility just went away.
Well, it just slipped further and further away from us. I don't know the exact year, but back in the 90s, Taiwan's GDP was like 40% that of China's GDP, right?
Yeah.
And we only had 1/50th of the population. Now we still are at 1/50th, 1/60th of the population, but we're like 5% of their GDP. So we, while per person, each Taiwanese is still wealthier than the average Chinese, but we're no longer in a place where our economy is anywhere near theirs.
You factor in things like PPP and the overall trajectory.
My goodness!
Yeah.
Then if you factor in PPP, they are already the top economy in the world. And I do think that the truth lies somewhere between nominal and PPP when it comes to GDP.
Can I add something?
Oh, sure.
People talk about how the GDP per capita and the GDP have consistently been rising, even during the past few decades of stagnation. But if you look at the data, real wages haven't risen. So if GDP and GDP per capita are rising, but real wages aren't, that means income equality is becoming greater.
Yeah, and I think it's been very, very hard on the Taiwanese because we are a hardworking people. So I can assure you that when people are scraping by here, it's not because they're lazy. It's not because they don't work much. It's because they can work their fingers to the bone. And if they're not in the right profession, if they're not in the right field, if they didn't invest in the right stocks, they simply can just make enough to get by. And the really horrible thing is if they didn't buy a house at the right time and their family can't help them get started on the mortgage, then they won't get to buy a house.
Lifetime renters.
And if the way things are, the way things tend to be in Chinese societies, and let's face it, Taiwan is a Chinese cultured society. If you don't have your own house, families don't feel comfortable having children. So this means that a lot of first childs are delayed, and maybe they don't get around to that second child, or maybe they don't end up having children at all. And that has contributed to our disastrous birth rate.
And for guys, if you don't have a house, then your potential wife's parents might object to her marrying you because they're going to say, hey,
He's
this
a
guy...
scrub.
Or not even a scrub, but it's like, hey, you're going to have a difficult life. It's not even... A lot of times it's not even personal. It's just, hey, it's true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So this goes... You mentioned we are a Chinese society, but I think this is a real departure from where you were in the past.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No. I hear you. It's really, really funny because I do have a Substack, it's typology.
You also have a nuclear Substack.
Yes. And it's really funny because when you write down your thoughts regularly like that, you can literally see them morphing in front of your eyes. And you can remember each version of yourself that wrote those words.
That's growth.
But at the same time, it's really, really... you're really in a different place. So I remember, I would say that from 2020 to even maybe 2022, 23, I was really sort of singing off the same hymn sheet as the liberal democracy, pro-DPP, like-minded democracy talk.
Someone called you Chinese, you'd be upset.
Yeah, I'll be like, it literally happened. I was actually on a panel with Yanis Varoufakis, and he said something like, China and Taiwan, they're really one nation. And I just got, in such a high dudgeon, and I shot back at him. It's like, Mr. Varoufakis, that is irredentist nonsense. And of course, I had an unfair advantage because, of course, I'm Taiwanese. How can you tell me that? How can this, Greek guy tell me I'm not Taiwanese? And the Taiwanese is in a very specific and different culture, and Taiwan is in a sovereign country. But to tell you the truth, I really didn't know that much about Taiwanese politics even at that time, right? I just felt like I was in this pro-DPP bubble. So how did things change? Several things changed at once. First of all, I became much more professional and serious about my pro-nuclear advocacy.
Right.
So before that, I was more of an offshore wind reporter who dabbled with nuclear advocacy, and then I became a full-time nuclear advocate. And I actually hung out with a lot of other pro-nuclear advocates. And they all tend to be like on the blue or white pro-TPP side of the spectrum.
Yeah, because the DPP spent like well over a decade. Actually, no, much more than that.
No, way longer
like all
than
my
that.
life, basically being anti-nuclear.
Do you know that the DPP was anti-nuclear before they were pro-Taiwan independence?
Yeah.
They were actually, they had a no nuclear homeland written into their founding charter, and this was in 1989. And I don't blame them for that because 1989 was the year of Chernobyl, and people really. It was fair enough to be afraid of nuclear power back then. People
Especially
really,
in a tiny island.
People really didn't understand it. The track record was not as complete. So, okay. And also people didn't know what was the potential harm. When Chernobyl first happened, we didn't know, we couldn't have known after decades of meticulous tracking that the number of actual deaths attributable to the radiation was absolutely tiny.
1989 was also when there used to be a pro-reunification faction within the DPP.
Yeah, so ironic, right?
Yeah.
But
they didn't get purged until the 90s.
So what's interesting is in their mind, being anti-nuclear became entwined in their political DNA with being pro-democracy. Mm-hmm. And at least their version of democracy. Right. And I spent a lot of hours trying to talk to the DPP people because I'm like, it's totally unacceptable for the pro-nuclear advocacy scene in Taiwan to be so non-inclusive. There's no pan-green people here. So I tried to convince pan-green people, try to make a safe space for them to advocate for nuclear power. And I realized that it's not because somehow the pro-KMT nuclear activists have made it a hostile environment. It's like you can't find hardly a single pro-DPP person to be pro-nuclear also.
If you are pro-nuclear in the DPP, that their activist circles will turn against you and see you as some sort of traitor.
Yes, and here's the funny thing, because obviously as you get to know people, you become friendly with them, they will admit to you, yeah, actually, I don't have a problem with nuclear power. It's just that I can never say that, or it's just that the party can never accept that. And I've actually, been friends with a pro-DPP person who's a bit kooky in that he's not just pro-nuclear power. He thinks Taiwan should get nuclear weapons. And so really out there, really radical, right? And I just asked him, would you write a very anodyne, neutral, pro-nuclear article from the point of view of a DPP supporter? And he said no. So I feel like, wow, you were so brave and out there and gutsy when it comes to Taiwan getting a nuclear bomb, but somehow writing editorial for nuclear power under your own name is too controversial. That's interesting.
To learn about Taiwan's history with the secret nuclear weapons program that existed until 1988, check out one of my previous episodes.
All right.
I guess a lot of it was pragmatism and just seeing the shortcomings of the DPP and their, I guess, ideological rigidity and inability to be flexible with certain things, like going with the as new evidence comes out, start changing your views.
Also, it's the lying. Really, it's the lying. Okay, I worked not just in nuclear energy, but also offshore wind. And I worked basically just as an energy reporter for a while.
Right.
I had my own little magazine. It's not really a magazine, it's a website, but people subscribe to it.
It's like a newsletter.
Exactly. And it was a lot about the development of renewable energy, especially offshore wind in Taiwan. And it is so messed up. It is set up for failure, full of corruption, unrealistic targets, and every step of the way, the government doesn't hesitate to lie.
This can overtake nuclear.
Exactly. It all got started with a lie, right? Because Tsai Ing-wen knew if she wanted to fulfill her no nuclear homeland pledge, she would have to at least find something that can theoretically take the place of nuclear power. And the thing she settled upon was offshore wind. I have nothing against offshore wind development in Taiwan. There is good wind resource through the Taiwan Straits. Unfortunately, it mainly blows in the winter, which is not when we need the most electricity. But that's all by the by. We could have developed a perfectly functional offshore wind industry in Taiwan. But because of the choices that the DPP has made, they basically painted it as a way for Taiwan to gain a whole new industry. They said, we can make our own wind turbine components. It's going to be like another TSMC.
There is a new industry. It's the corruption industry.
Exactly. And actually, you know what?
Do you think that's the reason why they're so anti-nuclear? Because the longer they can keep this green fantasy going on, they can keep on embezzling.
First of all, I think it's worse than embezzling because corruption, yeah, sure. Some people get some money for doing the things that they're supposed to do. This is worse because I feel like it's lying to the public. Maybe some people benefited. I really don't know.
Throwing away the public's future.
But even more serious, a lot of Taiwanese companies invested in offshore wind on the back of DPP's promises that they were going to make it into a real industry. And of course, it couldn't happen that way because Taiwan didn't have the supply chain capabilities. And so a lot of people actually lost their shirts. Now, that's not corruption, but it is worse because
But there also is
nothing
corruption
got done.
going on.
Yes, there is also corruption. But then there is a lot of people who lost their money because they believed in the DPP. And in the end, the Taiwanese offshore wind industry is basically an object lesson in how not to do things. And for President Tsai to be that, I always admired how she came across. Her presence, I thought, was, bit of a girl boss, It's a very attractive image to me at the time.
She has pretty high EQ.
And yet, I realized soon that she was the most shameless, bald-faced liar. And it's absolutely disgusting. I remember when she declared that Taiwan was going to go net zero by 2050. And by that time, it was already abundantly clear to every single person vaguely in the sphere of Taiwanese energy that her renewable policies were not going to reach their targets. And in fact, she left office with Taiwan having a higher carbon intensity than when she got there. So imagine having the gall already on the waning years of your second term, knowing that your energy policy is a complete failure and you kept closing those nuclear plants. So Taiwan's power production is dirtier than ever, then having the gall to set yet another goal.
Oh, the PM 2.5 levels and stuff, that was so noticeable. It was like day and night, just like almost overnight.
I mean, that's why I always say, right? The people always talk about nuclear waste and where you're going to put it. Well, the final repository for waste from burning fossil fuels is your lungs because it's put into the air. Yeah. So so that really got me thinking, got me nudged out of my narrative, and then it's like finding one thing after another. And I realized that the DPP, basically, they're really good at shaping the narrative. They're really good at
running elections.
And they're really good at doing like this kind of social media, aura up type of democracy, of diplomacy. But it's not real. It's nothing real. It's not real support. It's all like vibes.
Right. And that's why it's like a bubble and it's like it's bursting in real time.
It is. And I think you got to look at the second part of that, which is Ukraine, right? I think for a lot of people, it felt like the like-minded democracy, friendship stuff could be something ethereal that turns into something real. The idea, it's very Biden era to say now, is that the like-minded democracy will come together and form a united front. Mm-hmm. And therefore, it is better for us to have the friendship of Lithuania, let's say, than, I don't know, an actual treaty ally relationship with Honduras. Somehow, there was this atmosphere that Europe is behind us, the United States is behind us, all these like-minded democracies are behind us, and that's going to constitute this protection that China is not going to dare to breach. And I think Ukraine really, for me, completely shattered that on several levels.
Because you were like pro-Ukraine at the start of the conflict.
Yes, I was very pro-Ukraine at the start of the conflict. And because it was kind of, I would say everything up to the end of 2022, everything before the disastrous failed counteroffensive of 23, I would say, you can still kind of say it's kind of on track.
They fought pretty well back then.
They fought extremely well. And there was a sense that they were backed by the United States and the European allies, which were slow, but they were getting in line. Now, of course, it's so funny. It's because it's opposite. The United States wants to pull out, and it's the European allies that can't. But eventually, kind of, the more I found out about the conflict, the more it kind of dawned on me that the people of Ukraine are being set up for failure.
I mean, it starts way before 2022.
Yeah, it's that I found out way later. But I think one clip that really made a huge impression in my mind was actually Lindsey Graham. And he said something like, this is like the best deal for the United States. This is a policy we have to continue with. As long as we supply Ukraine with more money and more weapons, they're going to fight down to the last individual.
Please, we need money.
And, well, it's just like, well, I was going to say, well, it sounds like a great deal for the United States. Is it a great deal for Ukraine? How did it happen that this became Ukraine's job to be the tip of the spear against Russia? Yeah. And I think that's when I started putting a lot of things together and also getting to know more about what happened in Hong Kong and sort of meeting people from Hong Kong who had a different perspective on the protesters there. Kind of gave me a realization, which is that there are people who say they love Taiwan and want to protect Taiwan.
Oh, those are the worst.
Who are actually just hoping to set us up as a sacrificial lamb on the altar of democracy.
Oh, those are the worst. This reminds me of the tweet that you posted, I think, earlier this morning. The first time I realized the Ukraine-Russia story isn't as simple as we've been told was when a Ukrainian man told me, exacerbated, that both his Ukrainian parents were Putin supporters. Quote, it's because they are old people and propagandized by Russian TV. Aren't we all propagandized by our own version of Russian TV? This is all I ask. Give 1 minute to the other side for every 5 minutes you give your own, then wait to see which side predicts reality and which side lags. It doesn't mean you need to change sides, but you need to know what your own side is hiding from you.
Exactly.
And I think that's what you've been doing over the past few years.
Yeah, I think so. I think that kind of stereo vision that I get because I'm exposed to obviously the English language media world, but then also the pan-blue media here in Taiwan. And also, after a while, I can also directly access what people are saying in China, even though reading simplified is still kind of
Get good.
painful for me. I am a traditional character chauvinist all the way.
I kind of am too, but I'm at the point where when I read simplified characters, they automatically change into traditional in my head.
So I have all these streams of information. I can see what they're saying about themselves, about each other, about the future, and it just became kind of laughable how America kept getting caught by surprise by China's progress.
Right.
And they keep predicting China's downfall, and they never seem to predict their own downfalls. And
Uncle Chang.
Yeah, actually, I did read The Coming Collapse of China all the way back in 2002, I think it was. And he's still at it on Twitter. He's still doing this.
I like him. He's funny.
Yeah.
Now he's a Korea expert all of a sudden.
That's his hobby. He's got to branch out a little bit. Yeah.
So who did you support in the 2024 election over here?
Well, I supported Ko Wen-je, which is really funny because we talk about my transformation.
So by the end of Tsai's second term, you were already like, I need to...
I just knew I needed an option away from the KMT, away from the DPP, but I wasn't comfortable with the KMT because at that time I was still really anti-China.
Right.
And I thought that the KMT just cannot be trusted. They're way too cozy with the CCP. They are going to sell Taiwan out. No, I can't have anything to do with the KMT. Well, of course, I work with them. They're my friends. They're my fellow pro-nuclear activists. But the TPP I could work with because they seem very neutral on cross-strait relations.
They put that baggage behind them. It's the only party in Taiwan, I feel, where you have people that are both formerly TMT, formerly DPP, some very loud about being Chinese, others being separatists, but they're still able to work together despite disagreeing on these things because the mentality is, okay, reunification or separatism, it's going to happen eventually. Well, reunification is going to happen eventually, but not today or tomorrow.
Well, actually, I have a slightly different take from you
Sorry
than that.
for interrupting.
Okay. No, not at all. I think some of what you said definitely is valid for the older members of the TPP. But for the young people, I actually think they grew up in a space where maybe, but they grow up in a space. I would say the Chien-Ming generation is very
the sunflower movement generation.
Is very millennial.
Right.
It's
That's
very millennial.
True.
So by the time you get to younger folks, they don't resonate with that at all.
They don't necessarily view themselves as Chinese, but they don't hate China either.
And the DPP was always in power, right?
Right.
So they don't get that sense of, rage against the machine or whatever.
Right. The DPP is the machine.
Exactly. So instead of being 天然独, I think they were just like a blank sheet of paper. They were white. And here's what I think an interesting thing happened to the TPP, which is I joined the TPP over the KMT because I thought they were less compromised.
Oh, you're a party member.
Okay, not. But
you joined the ranks of their supporters.
I supported them because I thought the KMT was too compromised by being too close to China. But when I went into the TPP, collectively we went on a journey. I say collectively because I believe it's not just me. And
it's definitely not you.
I believe I would not have been able to make this journey if I weren't a part of the collective because I was so far on that one side.
Right.
How did I end up being on the side? I would say for the record, I am Chinese. I feel very Chinese, and I feel that she's doing a great job in China, and we could use some of that basic infrastructure here.
In the words of Ing-wen, you should not apologize for your identity.
Exactly. But how did I make this? It is a huge shift, right? I could not have. I'm honest when I tell you, I could not have made it as an individual. But the TPP, the young core of the TPP, maybe not all of us.
Right.
Some of the older people are definitely not on board with this. They're very scared and very threatened by this. Huang Shanshan or, Huang Guangqing, people like that. They're very threatened by it. But we've just become China boos. We've become really admiring of Chinese development. We've become...
So the DPP's not wrong. You guys are fellow travelers of the CPC.
but no, not the KMT. I'm talking about the TPP here.
Well, yeah, they say that about you guys too.
Okay, all right. But it's funny because the KMT would never go there. The KMT...
Oh, because the KMT has that sort of historical baggage.
Yeah. But I think what happened was we all snapped when Donald Trump started inflicting those tariffs on Taiwan and started chivying away TSMC.
Right.
For me, my personal, the moment when I snapped and I decided I was going to be pro-China rather than pro-US was when I heard that the most advanced node of TSMC was going to go to America.
Arizona.
And that was the red line that I've been told so many times that they would never cross. And so you're telling me that you're going to rely for your protection on somebody who has been robbing you and shaking you down.
Exactly. Well, hold on. Back in 2022, I was saying with the CHIPS Act was a forced tech transfer from TSMC to the US, probably to a company like Intel. But if you heard me saying that back then, as somebody who's not in tech, but having, I'd say, decent insight and heuristics about these things, you would have thought I was crazy, right? Back then?
Well, I would say that even back then, I knew it was extractive and exploitative, but I thought that it was acceptable because I think I've always been a realist too. So I knew that, there's some quid pro quo going on there. Not everything is about agency and sovereignty and like-minded democracies. So I knew there was some quid pro quo, but I thought it was all right. It was acceptable. Okay, we give you some chip technology and we get some protection or at least some, non-negligible deterrence. Because there's always, if you're Chinese, you cannot assume that the Americans won't intervene. Right. So I thought that was a fair trade. I think in retrospect, even back then, what I would say is just look at what China has in their arsenal and what America has. And I think the most, probably the thing that would convince 2022 Angelica that even if America had the best of intentions, they're not capable anymore as our guardian angel, is that the Chinese have capable hypersonic missiles now. And if you fire enough of those hypersonic missiles, aircraft carriers go down.
During one of the military drills when the PLA was flying over the Taiwan Strait, the military authorities over here were sending broadcasts over to them telling them to turn around or whatever. I mean, besides that one guy saying, "操你干嘛?" this other pilot was only the PLA can protect Taiwan. I really like the way he worded that. It's hey, this isn't us wanting to attack you. It's a fight between U.S. influence versus China.
Yeah,
and they're just honest about it.
And you know what? It's in Chinese we say 细思极恐, And I don't know how to translate that. It's like the more you think about it, the more you feel a chill down your spine. The more you understand the American plan for Taiwan, the more you realize that you're trapped in a horror movie and the person that you thought has been protecting you is actually the big bad monster all along, right? Because you realize, oh, even the Americans knew probably back in 2006 that they probably can't win against the PLA in a Taiwan Straits contingency. So they're probably not going to help us win, because even if they try to, maybe they can't. And then you just realize after Ukraine, they started saying different things too. Both the plans pushed by very top tier American, I don't know if they're think tankers or policy experts, but one's called the Burning Moat, and the other one is called Hellscape. Those are two very mainstream alternatives for how the United States would respond in a Taiwan contingency. And they're basically both some flavor of, we'll send you drones.
Yep.
And I'm sorry. That is totally unacceptable, because first of all, we're going to go up against the Chinese. So to go up against the Chinese with American-made drones, to me, is really not the competition. Not the competition that we would not be set up for success. We would be set up for failure. And I realize that we are kind of being set up for bloody failure, because if China did end up taking Taiwan in a bloody fight, that is something that they can use to attack China morally for probably a century. After all, they did use Tiananmen for 36 years. They're still going on about it, right? So, the attack of Taiwan, that they can keep juicing for their moral superiority. And especially the stuff it's pure fantasy, by the way, but the way they try to sketch out the scenarios for how Taiwanese can become resistant fighters and go into the mountains.
The DPP is still playing the 抗中保台 card, even though objectively it's not possible. Going up to the mountains, are you talking about Shen Boyang Puma Shen's Kuma Academy?
Kuma Academy
Black
stuff,
Bear Academy,
yeah.
黑熊学院. By the way, for the audience who doesn't know, the Kuma Academy is basically like a wannabe version of the Azov Battalion that like the US
Except
is kind of
extremely lame.
Yeah, it's a joke. Everyone jokes about them.
Yeah, it's definitely not. There's no.
When I was on the military base in Chengongling for the basic training for my substitute service, people there were making jokes about 黑熊学院, the Kuma Academy. It's that much of a joke.
It is a complete joke, but the idea that you would put Taiwan in that the Taiwanese in such an unwinnable situation.
It's disgusting.
It's disgusting. It's like, oh, yeah, freedom is worth it. You know, you're going to be martyrs for democracy. Actually, one thing that really disgusted me was I was having an argument, predictably, with one of the white male pro-democracy.
Was it that guy with Why Taiwan in his Twitter handle?
No, that's another interesting instance. He was the one that advocated for shelling the Three Gorges Dam, because nothing like a you know,
drowning a bunch of people.
Drowning 1 million Chinese people to make sure China leaves us alone. No, it's he was actually talking about how even a failed attempt like Hong Kong was worth it, and I was like, well, why? Looking back in retrospect, would you say that Hong Kong was worth it, right? Because the handover was actually in 1997, and until 2019. Hong Kong actually had a lot of freedoms. You know, you still had Apple Daily, being published in Hong Kong, basically, saying every nasty thing you could think of about the Chinese government.
Because back then, the one country part of the one country two systems wasn't directly challenged. So it's like, okay.
Yeah.
But then once you directly challenge it, then it's like, okay, there needs to be a response.
That's when the national security law came in, and I would say Hong Kong lost a lot of freedom and for the individual. It's still, I think, freer than people think it is.
I don't know. I go there, I feel like nothing's really changed.
Yeah, I don't know. But anyhow, it's I haven't really been there, but people write things like, "Oh, Hong Kong will never be the same again" and stuff like that. So I don't know. But anyhow, certainly it took a black eye on the international stage, and you see that, my old boss is in jail, Jimmy Lai.
Oh, right.
He's an old man, so people see an old man in jail. People see that Joshua Wong kid with a chain around his waist, and people feel like Hong Kong is just like a den of inequity and stuff like that. And I just realized that, for a guy like that, it was worth it, because it's not about how much freedom the people of Hong Kong actually have. It's about making communist China reveal themselves for being the beast-like evil creatures that they are, so that they can be exposed. And it would be Taiwan's role to, like I said before, like be the lamb on the altar of democracy. And I really, having seen that movie play out in Ukraine, I really don't like reboots. Yeah. So I don't want a Pacific reboot of that. And so that's when I started seeing America as more of a threat to Taiwan than China. And that allowed me to at least talk to people from China and read material from China.
You're still in the minority, but this minority is growing day by day.
Yeah, and we keep getting off topic, but I was talking about how I was not doing this alone.
Right,
There's a whole bunch of TPP influencers who kind of made the same journey, TPP-aligned influencers. And maybe not TPP, but, like...
Former DPP, disillusioned by the DPP.
Or I would say this, like the pro-reunification or open to reunification influencers had a really easy time picking up TPP listeners.
Right.
Because they're open-minded.
People like Guo Zhengliang.
Yeah, people like Guo Zhengliang and
nowadays,
people like
Guan Zhang.
Guan Zhang. But Guan Zhang, I would
was
say...
one of the guys in your cohort that made the collective...
I think when Guan Zhang went over, it was both a catalyst and a symptom.
It was.
So it was a catalyst in that it gave everybody permission to say, I am Chinese. China, mainland is awesome. I want to go there. I want to have better relationships with China.
So this is the Guanzhang effect that you coined.
Exactly. And I think he could do it because he's kind of like a bit of an avatar for a certain type of guy in Taiwan.
Yes.
And he's changed his opinions about politics often. Mm-hmm. I think he used to be blue and then
he supported Han
green.
Kuo-yu in Kaohsiung, and then he supported Tsai Ing-wen, was very green, was one of those like, I'm Taiwanese, not Chinese.
Yeah.
But he supported Ko Wen-je, and then I think this one of the biggest catalysts for his change was the way that the DPP clamped down on Ko Wen-je.
So this is one of the things where... to tell you the truth, when Ko Wen-je was first taken into detention, the case was so messy. I didn't know if I could defend him. Maybe he really was corrupt, right? So at first I didn't defend him. Right. But the longer he was kept incommunicado, and the more...
locked up in a jail cell that's over 40 degrees Celsius or 104 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah, exactly. And the more I actually got to know the case,
in the judicial system and their like flimsy evidence, which is not evidence at all.
And the more I saw the close coordination between
the media, the party, the judiciary.
Exactly. And how the details of the case that are not actually relevant but is like personally defamatory gets leaked to mirror media all the time. I actually became convinced that Ko Wen-je is 100% being railroaded.
Yeah. If they had actual dirt on him, they wouldn't need to do all of this.
It's been almost a year.
Yeah.
Come on. You've kept an old man incommunicado for a whole year, and what do you actually even have against him?
Well, I think the biggest thing is it's to set an example because the TPP, I feel, is one of the truly independent third parties. Like in the past, there were third parties, but they were part of like larger coalitions, like the Chien-Ming and the Xindang were part of the KMT coalition. But with just 8 seats in the legislature, right, they are the tiebreaker. They are the decision makers in the legislature if both the DPP and the KMT vote differently. And the fact is, I think psychologically to the DPP, Ko Wen-je used to be seen as someone on their team. But now he's like not playing their game, and his party is saying, hey, no, we're going to vote for what we believe in, and if it happens to benefit the KMT or if it happens to be the same as the KMT stance, like nuclear energy, then be it.
The DPP made a huge mistake because actually...
Right after the election, too.
After the election, the TPP was actually still up for grabs.
Yeah.
They were very open internally to voting with whoever is most aligned with their convictions.
It all started because the TPP decided to vote for their own candidate for speaker. They knew they weren't going to win, but they didn't support Chien-Ming or Han Kuo-yu.
Yeah.
And because the KMT had a few more seats than the DPP, Han Kuo-yu won, and the DPP was upset because they were like, if you had voted for our candidate, then we would have had the majority in the legislature, or Chien-Ming would have been the speaker of the legislature.
So there's a way in which the DPP takes TPP for granted and yet is resentful of them at the same time.
Yeah, so instead of, working with the TPP to get a more favorable legislature, they just instead launch a mass recall.
Yeah, the mass recall thing is the darndest thing because I think that is what really pushed, all the other factors too, but it really pushed the KMT and the TPP together, and we worked together very well to make sure that the mass recall were defeated. And I think this is the first time that the DPP realized for sure that they are actually in the minority. And the sort of TPP, which had a very up for grabs quality before,
now it's very
definitely
anti-DPP.
not DPP. Yeah, no matter what they are.
Do you want to explain to the audience what the mass recalls were and how they played out?
Sure. So after the 2024 elections, the DPP successfully got the President Lai elected. But in the legislature, nobody got over 50%.
So 57.
Yeah.
Nobody got 57. DPP got 51. KMT got 52 plus 2 KMT leaning independents.
So basically the 8 TPP lawmakers became the swing vote.
Yes.
And so whoever they sided with would have the majority. And at the beginning, the TPP was a party that really valued its independence, and it didn't want to become what we call a wing party here in Taiwan, like a appendage to the KMT or an appendage to the DPP. But as time went on, the DPP basically pushed the KMT and the TPP together because they were very hostile, impossible to work with, through our chairman, basically through the judiciary, through the prosecutors into jail. Of course, I guess that can't be proven, but it seems very, very fishy.
Then the second step was...
The second step?
After throwing Ko Wen-je into jail, the second step was, okay, we're gonna seize control of the legislature.
Exactly. They basically... started saying, okay, we can't get anything done because the KMT and the TPP were just working together to hand Ls after Ls to the DPP.
And they both work for the CPC apparently.
So for quite a few years now, I would say, the Tsai Ing-wen re-election is a great case. The DPP have always hit the resist China and protect Taiwan button whenever they needed votes. And it's worked out for them so far. But they, when they fail at governing, when people become discontent with their performance, they just hit that button again and again. So now that the KMT and TPP are working together so well, they hit that button again. Okay, now all the KMT and TPP legislators are
compromised.
In cahoots with communist China. And that led them to take the decision to do a mass recall.
Usually recalls are, it's like if you have one legislator that's, failing his duties, betraying the people or whatever, it's targeted towards an individual. You don't do a mass recall against an entire party. Just say, I don't like your party.
Yeah.
You guys are all agents of the CPC, so I'm going to remove you all.
So I think that truly just tanked their legitimacy. But they bet it all on counter China, resist China, and protect Taiwan. And so they went full
this entire year.
Taiwanese McCarthyism. We had to live through a year of Taiwanese McCarthyism of the most retarded variety. They had their own little dance. They would camp in street corners, have concerts, and I actually went to one of their recall events, and because when I speak in Chinese, I can kind of give off a grown-up abroad vibe, so they very much assumed that I was, a supporter of their cause, and they wanted to explain to me all about how terrible those KMT legislators were. And I did ask them some questions, sort of not breaking my cover, but just like, aren't you guys afraid of a potential military confrontation? And it looks like Trump isn't that trustworthy right now. What if America doesn't come? And they were just saying the most retarded things. They're just like, we believe, of course, we trust in our allies, but we believe fundamentally when it comes to protecting our country, it is up to us. And yes, I am willing to fight China. And it doesn't matter if the United States come or not, it's our country, and therefore we are going to protect it ourselves.
A lot of them are draft dodging pussies, though.
It seems like they were just in this never land.
Like the speaker of the DPP, Wu Zheng, he didn't do his conscription.
I didn't want to poke into it too hard and blow my cover, but just looking at the people I was talking to, a middle-aged woman and a rather overweight young man, like I just didn't think that they were like,
fit to fight,
special forces material. I don't know, but the fact that I don't think, in a weird way, I don't think they were lying to me. They were just so detached from reality.
Right.
So,
they presented this as a grassroots event, but at the same time, they're not even hiding it anymore. Like Chien-Ming, the minority speaker of the legislature, is basically admitting that he played a huge part in coordinating all of the different various so-called grassroots organizations. You had this sugar daddy, Robert Cao Xing-cheng.
Yeah, well, here's the thing, right? Here's my idea of how it all went down, okay?
Right.
So basically, they wanted to have it both ways, and they ended up sitting between two stools. They wanted to activate people who were very out there and who were very extreme and would give voice to very, very, I don't know if I should say fascistic, sometimes it really feels that way. Bajong, right? The people who are willing to use hate to spread their message, okay? So they don't want to be attached to it, though. Mm-hmm. So they kept them at arm's length.
Right.
And it turns out when you try to control groups at arm's length, you can't get them to be on message. Mm-hmm. And they end up being really messy, disruptive, and annoying as hell. And you don't have the same message discipline. But at the same time, when things failed, and I think Lai Ching-te did try to kind of cut or, kind of distance away a little bit from the recall, Robert Cao got really mad.
Yeah, it
he
basically
was just
gave away that this was all very coordinated from up top.
Yeah, exactly, because I think he was feeling a bit like a used Kleenex, right? I mean, so he kind of turned on the DPP in such a way that he forced them to undisown the recall movement. And so now they're still like somewhat in support of it for the upcoming...
But they're pessimistic. Oh, by the way, on July 26th, they tried to recall 24 legislators and 1 mayor, and none of them passed.
Zero, goose egg.
Zero. And then there's 7 more up on August 23rd.
Yeah,
and I don't know how it's
along
gonna
with
turn
the
out.
pro-nuclear referendum.
Yeah.
And actually, I think it gave the pro-nuclear referendum, which I didn't think was going to pass, a real boost.
It did.
Yeah,
because it's packaged together now.
It's packaged together, and also even if the pro-nuclear referendum, even if the yeses win, there's still a 25% voting threshold. So I don't know what your audience is like, but if anybody's in Taiwan and capable of voting, please, no matter or you have a legislator that day to recall or not, you go to the polls and you vote yes for the referendum to keep Mainland nuclear power plant going.
Yeah. It's quite interesting. And I feel like a lot of people now who are kind of indifferent to nuclear power are going to vote in agreement for it just to piss off the DPP, because now they hate the DPP. Everyone hates, not everyone, a lot of people hate the DPP now. It's not because they're really political or because of like their feelings on cross-strait relations. It's because the DPP has just been so annoying, and the way they've harassed people, like some of these DPP activists trying to get petitions to do the recalls, they would harass like old Chinese Civil War veterans saying, oh, you don't support Taiwan separatism? Go back to China then. You don't even belong here.
Yeah, it's really nasty stuff. And as Guanzhang said it, I think he said it really well. He said, we cannot let the DPP kidnap us with their ideology for another generation.
That's very true. We've already been kidnapped by them for over a generation, because keep in mind the desinitization process in Taiwan was very top-down. Chen Shui-bian won the election in 2000 with just 40% of the vote. He starts changing the curriculum. In the past, it was like our country's history and world history. And by our country's history, it was all of Chinese history, and Taiwan history was part of it. Then after the 2000s, it was like Taiwan history, Chinese history, and world history. So it's kind of implying that Taiwan history and Chinese history is disconnected. Mm-hmm. And now it's Taiwan history, East Asian history, and world history.
Definitely. It's also, it makes a mockery out of our culture. Even on the government's website, right? The ethnicity of Taiwan.
96% other.
Exactly. It's like, oh, you can be, all 9 different kinds of Aborigine. You can have Japanese ancestry, but
Vietnamese, Indonesian, whatever.
For some reason, Tibetan Mongolian was given its own little category, but for the 99.6% of us who could spit in a tube, send it to a DNA service and have it come back as Han Chinese, we were put into the category of other. So unacknowledged majority, just the island of leftovers, island of mystery meat.
Mystery meat. And we're all also, anyone who's not on board with the DPP is also an impurity of our vibrant democracy. We're mostly impurities. 60% of us are impurities.
So I think that's when a lot of us just said, we're not putting up with this anymore.
So our time in the studio is almost up. Before we go, though, is there anything you want to plug in? Any last words for the audience?
Yeah, sure, please. I would love to have more conversation, both on my Twitter at Angelica Oung and my Substack, typology.substack.com, spelled TAIPOLOGY.
All right. Thank you very much for coming on the show, and I'm glad we got to mutually unblock.
Let's do a handshake
for the camera.
between Yeah, Taiwan's top neoliberal shill and a bona fide communist.
I thought it was like the Taiwan tanky.
Yeah, Taiwan's top tanky, strange animal friends.
Yeah. All right, thank you very much. Hope to see you back on the show in the future.
Yeah, I'd love to.
That was my interview with Angelica and our formal reconciliation after years of being mutually blocked because she probably thought I was an asshole and I probably thought that she was a massive bitch. I do believe in getting rid of my enemies, but that doesn't always mean one person winning over another. I think in our case, an enemy was eradicated and replaced by a friend who was very insightful and very honest with her beliefs. And I'm sure many of you would agree that she's a guest worthy of coming back on the show many more times in the future. If you want more insights into Taiwan and cross-strait relations or anything tangentially related, follow me on social media. Twitter is where I'm mostly active, although I'm also active on Instagram and Telegram. If you got questions about anything discussed in this episode or anything else, drop a comment on YouTube or send me an email at straighttalk@xiangyu.tw. If you found this episode valuable and want to support this kind of work, stories and contexts you don't often hear in mainstream media, please consider sharing this episode with friends, subscribing on YouTube or your podcast app. And if you really want to go one step further, you can join as a channel member on YouTube, become a patron on Patreon, or make a one-time donation through any of the links in the show notes. Thank you all for tuning in, and I'll see you guys in the next episode.